Dear people watching and listening, Assalamu alaikum. Kindly like and share this video with your friends and family, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. The book will now continue with the part 2, which is about the campaign against apostasy. Start of chapter 12. Abu Bakr strikes. If the faith of Abu Bakr were to be weighed against the faith of all the people of the earth, his faith would outweigh theirs. A quote by Umar bin Al-Khattab radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Abu Bakr was the bravest of the people. A quote by Ali ibn Abi Talib radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. The apostasy had become so general that it affected every tribe in Arabia with the exception of the people in Makkah and Medina and the tribe of Siegeoftaif. In some cases, the entire tribe apostatized. In other cases, part of the tribe apostatized while part continued to follow the true faith. And among those who remained Muslims, many had to pay with their lives for their faith. The flames of disbelief were fanned by two false prophets, Tulayha bin Khalid and Musaylama bin Habib, and a false prophetess by the name of Sajah bint al-Harith. Musaylama had been an impostor for some time, while Tulayha made his claim to prophethood during the illness of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The most immediate threat to Medina was posed by Tulayha and the tribes of West Central and North Central Arabia that followed him. These tribes were the Ghatfan, the Tay, the Hawazin, the Bani Asad, and the Bani Sulaim. The concentrations of apostates nearest Medina were located in two areas, Abrak, 70 miles northeast of Medina, and Zuqisa, 24 miles east of Medina. These concentrations consisted of the Ghatfan, the Hawazin, and the Tay. A week or two after the departure of the army of Usama, the apostates at Zuqisa sent a delegation to Abu Bakr radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. "We shall continue the prayers," said the delegates, "but we shall not pay any taxes. Abu Bakr have none of it." "By Allah," he replied, "if you withhold a single ounce of what is due from you, I shall fight you. I allow you 1 day in which to give your reply." The envoys were taken aback by the determination and confidence of the new caliph, who seemed to be entirely unaware of the weakness of his position. And he had given them 1 day. The following morning, before the single day's ultimatum had expired, the envoys slipped out of Medina, which meant a rejection of Abu Bakr's demands. Soon after their departure, Abu Bakr sent his own envoys to all the apostate tribes, calling upon them to remain loyal to Islam and continue to pay their taxes. But the apostate envoys from Zuqisa, before leaving Medina, had had a good look at the place, and their keen eyes had noticed the absence of warriors. On returning to Zuqisa, they told their comrades about their conversation with Abu Bakr and the very vulnerable state of Medina. Meanwhile, Tulayha, who was now at Samira, had reinforced the apostates at Zuqisa with a contingent under his brother Hibal, a wily and resourceful general. When the apostates heard the reports of the envoys, the temptation proved too much for them. They decided to have a crack at Medina while it was still defenseless. Consequently, the force at Zuqisa moved forward from Zuhussa, from where, after forming a base, part of the force advanced still near Medina and went into camp, preparatory to attacking the town. It was now 3rd week of July 632, late Rabiul Akhir 11 Hijri. Abu Bakr received intelligence of this move and at once undertook the organization of the defenses of Medina. The main army was out under Usama, but Medina was not as defenseless as the rebels had imagined. Quite a few warriors were still there, especially from the clan of Bani Hashim, the Prophet's own clan, who had remained behind to mourn their departed kinsman. From these remnants, Abu Bakr scraped together a fighting force. The confidence of Abu Bakr, never shaken, was strengthened by the thought that he had such stalwarts with him as Ali, Zubair bin al-Awwam, and Talha bin Ubaidullah radiyallahu ta'ala anhum ajma'in. Each of these was appointed to command 1/3 of the newly created force. For 3 days nothing happened. The apostates, uncertain of how they should set about their task, remained inactive. Then, on orders from Abu Bakr, the Muslims sallied out of Medina. They launched a quick attack on the forward camp of the apostates and drove them back. The apostates withdrew to Zuhussa. The Muslims informed Abu Bakr of their success, and the Caliph ordered them to stay where they were and await his instructions. The following day, Abu Bakr set out from Medina with a long string of pack camels, for the riding camels had all gone with Usama, and these inferior camels were the best that Abu Bakr could muster in the way of transportation. As the convoy got to the abandoned apostate camp, the Muslims who had driven the apostates away mounted these camels, and the force advanced towards Zuhussa, the apostate base. Here the enemy waited, and Hibal, the brother of Tulayha, showed his military cunning. He kept his men behind the crest of a slope, some distance ahead of the base towards which the Muslims were advancing. The Muslims, mounted on their pack camels, rode up the slope unaware of the enemy, who waited just beyond the crest. When the unsuspecting Muslims got near the crest, the apostates stood up and hurled upon the forward slope a countless number of goat skins filled with water. As these goat skins rolled down the crest towards the Muslims, a wild din arose from the apostate ranks as they hammered on drums and screamed at the top of their voices. The pack camels, untrained for battle and not used to sudden loud noises or the sight of unfamiliar objects rolling towards them in large numbers, turned and bolted. The Muslims did their utmost to control their panic-stricken mounts but failed, and very soon the entire Muslim force was home again. Hibal had reason to feel pleased with himself. He had pulled a fast one on the Muslims and driven them back to Medina without, so to speak, firing a shot. In view of this clever trick which Hibal pulled off, it is possible that the preceding apostate withdrawal had been a feint planned by Hibal to draw the Muslims out of the security of their town towards Zuhussa. We do not know, but Hibal now made the mistake of assuming that the Muslims were frightened, and that their hasty move back to Medina was a sign of weakness. He did not know that the Muslims were mounted on pack camels, and that it was these animals that had panicked and not the men who rode them. The part of his force that had remained at Zuhussa was informed of this success and called forward. The same evening the full force of the apostates advanced and re-established the camp near Medina, from which they had withdrawn only the day before. The spirits of the apostates were high. The Muslims, on the other hand, were very angry, and every man was determined to set the record straight in a return engagement. Abu Bakr knew that the apostates had returned to their camp near Medina, and decided to assail them before they could complete their preparations for battle. Under his instructions, the Muslims spent most of the night reorganizing their small army and preparing for battle. During the latter part of the night, Abu Bakr led his army out of Medina and formed up for the assault. He deployed the army with a center, 2 wings and a rear guard. Keeping the center under his direct command, he placed the right wing under Nu'man, the left wing under Abdullah, and the rear guard under Suwaid, all 3 of whom were sons of Muqarran. Before dawn the army was set in motion towards the enemy camp, where the apostates, confident of an easy victory on the morrow, slept soundly. This time it was Hibal who was surprised. The first glow of dawn had not yet appeared when a furious, screaming mass of Muslims fell upon the camp with drawn swords. The apostates did not stand upon the order of their going. Many were killed, but most of them found safety in flight, and did not stop until they had got to Zuhussa, where they paused to rest and reorganize. Their spirits were no longer so high. This round had been won by Abu Bakr radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, and his was no empty success. It was a bloody tactical action in which the enemy had been driven back by the sword and not by deception alone. Abu Bakr radiyallahu ta'ala anhu had decided to catch the enemy unawares and thus get the benefit of surprise to offset his numerical inferiority, and in this he had succeeded. He needed quick tactical victory, and he had got it. As a matter of interest, it may be noted that this is the first instance in Muslim history of a night attack, a tactical method which did not achieve popularity until the First World War. Having won this round, Abu Bakr decided to give no respite to his opponents. He would catch them before the effect of the shock wore off, and while alarm and confusion kept them disorganized, as the sun rose, he marched to Zu-Qissa. On arrival at Zu-Qissa, he formed up for battle as he had done the night before, and then launched his attack. The apostates put up a fight, but their morale was low, and after some resistance they broke contact and retreated to Abrak, where more clansmen of the Ghatfan, the Hawazin, and the Tay were gathered. Abu Bakr, on capturing Zu-Qissa, sent a small force under Talha bin Ubaidullah to pursue the enemy. Talha advanced a short distance and killed some stragglers, but the small size of his force prevented him from doing any great damage to the retreating apostates. The capture of Zu-Qissa took place on or about July 30, 632, the 8th of Jamadiul Awwal, 11 Hijri. Abu Bakr left Nu'man bin Muqarran with a detachment to hold Zu-Qissa, and with the rest of his force rode back to Medina. On August 2nd, the army of Usama returned to Medina. The capital of Islam was no longer in danger. On leaving Medina, Usama had marched to Tabuk. Most of the tribes in this region opposed him fiercely, but Usama, with the zeal and vigor of youth, swept across the land with fire and sword. He raided far and wide in the region of northern Arabia, starting with the Quza'a, who scattered under the blows of his columns and then made their way to Daumatuljandal, where Khalid anhu had captured Uqaydah 2 years before. Usama killed all those who fought him, and burnt orchards and villages, leaving in his wake a hurricane of smoke. As a result of his operations, several tribes resubmitted to Medina and re-embraced Islam. But the Quza'a remained rebellious and unrepentant, and had to be dealt with again a short while later by Amr bin al-As. Usama next marched to Mutah, fought the Christian Arabs of the tribes of Kalb and Ghassan, and avenged the death of his father. There was, however, no major battle. Then he returned to Medina, bringing with him a large number of captives and a considerable amount of wealth, part of which comprised the spoils of war, and part the taxes paid by the repentant tribes. The army of Usama was warmly welcomed by Abu Bakr and the people of Medina, to whom its return brought comfort and assurance. It had been away for 40 days. After the defeat of the apostates at Zu-Qissa, several apostate clans turned viciously upon those of their members who remained Muslims and slaughtered them. The killing was done mercilessly, some Muslims being burnt alive and others thrown from the tops of cliffs. Abu Bakr heard the news of these atrocities with cold anger, and swore that he would kill every infidel who had murdered a Muslim and carry fire and sword to every apostate clan. Things were now looking up for the Muslims. The recent victories of Abu Bakr, though not decisive, had raised spirits. Some of the apostate tribes living near Medina had repented, rejoined the faith, and paid their taxes and more. The army of Usama was back with captives and wealth. The coffers of the Muslim state were full again, providing a sound financial base for all-out war against the enemies of Islam. But Abu Bakr decided that he needed more time before launching a general offensive in order to rest and re-equip the army of Usama. He consequently ordered Usama to rest his men at Medina, and while doing so also ensure the safety of the capital. His own hastily scraped together force had now begun to feel like an army, and he decided to use this army, while the army of Usama rested and re-equipped to fight another offensive battle against the apostates gathered at Abrak. Now Abu Bakr really prepared for war, not only to punish the tribes for the heinous crime of apostasy, but also to avenge the innocent blood of the faithful Muslims who had been murdered by the apostates. When Abu Bakr announced his intention of leading his army to Abrak, Muslim elders tried to restrain him, May Allah bless you, O Caliph of the Messenger of Allah, they said. Do not endanger yourself by leading the army in person. If you should be killed, it would upset the order of things. Your very existence is a source of trouble to the unbelievers. Appoint another to command the army. Then, if he is killed, you can appoint yet another. Abu Bakr was shortly going to place an immense burden on the shoulders of the Muslims, both commanders and troops. He was going to ask them to strive as they had never done before, and to face dangers which would appall most warriors. He could think of no better way of making them come up to his expectations than setting the pace himself. No, by Allah, he replied, I shall not do that. I shall not trouble others with my burden. And it was under Abu Bakr that the small army marched out to Zul-Qissa, where Nu'man awaited him. This Nu'man was later to achieve everlasting fame as the victor of Nihawand in Persia. Here Abu Bakr placed Nu'man and his brothers in command of the wings and the rear guard, as he had done for his night attack, and set out for Abrak. It was now the 2nd week of August, 3rd week of Jamadul Awwal. When the Muslims got to Abrak, they found that the enemy was already formed up in battle array. Without delay, Abu Bakr deployed his army and attacked the apostates. The apostate spirits now were not as high as they had been a fortnight before. The defeated elements, which had escaped from Zul-Qissa, had joined the apostates at Abrak, and as is usual in such cases, their arrival had had a depressing effect on others. For some time the apostates, who were numerically superior, resisted the Muslim attack. Then they broke and fled. Abu Bakr had won another victory. The remnants of the apostates fleeing from Abrak and certain other clans from this region travelled to Buzakha, whither Tulayha the impostor had moved from Samira. But other clans living in this area submitted to the columns that Abu Bakr sent out after the capture of Abrak to subdue the countryside. Now more taxes were gathered, to which the repentant clans gladly added gifts that were as gladly accepted. The following day the Caliph left Abrak for Medina. On arrival at Medina he spent a few days in dealing with matters of state. Then he moved to Zul-Qissa with the army of Usama. But it had now ceased to be the army of Usama, for Usama had completed his work and his army was now the army of Islam, to be used by the Caliph as required. Usama's tenure of command was over. At Zul-Qissa, Abu Bakr organized the army of Islam into several corps to deal with the various enemies who occupied the entire land of Arabia, except for the small area in the possession of the Muslims. This was the first time that the Muslim army was organized into separate corps, each with its own commander, for independent missions under the general strategical guidance of the Caliph. Muslim commanders, until now essentially tacticians, would henceforth enter the higher realms of strategy and master those realms with sure-footedness and ease that would astonish the world. At Zul-Qissa in the 4th week of August 632, early Jamadul Akhir, 11 Hijri, Abu Bakr planned the strategy of the campaign of the apostasy. The battles which he had fought recently against the apostate concentrations at Zul-Qissa and Abrak were in the nature of immediate preventive action to save Medina and discourage further offensives by the enemy, thus gaining time for the preparation and launching of his main forces. These actions could be described as spoiling attacks. They had enabled Abu Bakr to secure a base from which he could fight the major campaign that lay ahead. Abu Bakr had no illusions about the task that faced him. He had to fight not one but several enemies: Tulayha the impostor at Buzakha, Malik bin Nuwayra at Butah, Musaylima the liar at Jamama. He had to deal with widespread apostasy on the eastern and southern coasts of Arabia, in Bahrain, in Oman, in Mahra, in Hadramaut, in the Yemen. There was apostasy in the region south and east of Mecca, and in northern Arabia the Quza'a had staged a comeback after the return of the army of Usama. The situation of the Muslims can be compared with a small island of belief in an ocean of disbelief, a lamp shining in the darkness which held every manner of danger for the faithful. Abu Bakr had not only to keep the flame alive, but also to dispel the darkness and crush the forces of evil that gathered threateningly on all sides. In numerical strength, the apostates vastly outnumbered the Muslims, though they were not united. Abu Bakr's military strength lay in his having among the Muslims the finest fighting men of the time, and he had a tremendous weapon, Khalid bin Al-Waleed, the sword of Allah. Abu Bakr planned his strategy accordingly. He formed the army into several corps. The strongest corps, and this was the main punch of the Muslims, was the corps of Khalid. This was used to fight the most powerful of the rebel forces, to crack the toughest nuts. Other corps were given areas of secondary importance, in which to bring the less dangerous apostate tribes to their senses after the main enemy opposition was crushed. 2 corps were kept as reserves to reinforce the corps of Khalid or any other corps that might need assistance. The first corps to go into action was that of Khalid, and the timing of the dispatch of other corps hinged on the operations of Khalid, who was given the task of fighting the strongest enemy forces one after the other. Abu Bakr's plan was first to clear the area of west-central Arabia, the area nearest Medina, then tackle Malik bin Nuwayra, and finally concentrate against the most dangerous enemy of the lot, Musaylama the liar. Thus Abu Bakr would achieve concentration of force by dealing with the main enemy army separately and in turn progressing step by step from nearer to farther regions. The Caliph formed 11 corps, each under its own commander. A standard was given to each corps. The available manpower was distributed among these corps, and while some commanders were given immediate missions, others were given missions for which they would be launched later. The commanders were also instructed to pick up brave men on the way as they marched to their objectives. The 11 corps commanders and their assigned objectives were as follows. 1. Khalid, first Tulayha at Buzakha, then Malik bin Nuwayra at Mutah. 2. Ikrimah bin Abi Jahl, contact Musaylama at Jamama but not get involved until more forces were built up. 3. Amr bin al-As, the apostate tribes of Quza'a and Wadi'a in the area of Tabuk and daumatuljandal. 4. Shurahbil bin Hassana, follow Ikrimah and await the Caliph's instructions. 5. Khalid bin Sa'id, certain apostate tribes on the Syrian frontier. 6. Turayfa bin Hajiz, the apostate tribes of Hawazin and Bani Sulaim in the area east of Medina and Makkah. 7. Ala bin al-Hadrami, the apostates in Bahrain. 8. Huzaifa bin Mihsan, the apostates in Oman. 9. Arfaja bin Harsama, the apostates in Mahra. 10. Muhajir bin Abi Umayyah, the apostates in the Yemen, then the Kinda in Hadramaut. 11. Suwaid bin Muqaran, the apostates in the coastal area north of the Yemen. As soon as the organization of the corps were completed, Khalid marched off, to be followed a little later by Ikrimah and Amr bin al-As. The other corps were held back by the Caliph and dispatched weeks and even months later. Their dispatch was conditioned by the progress of Khalid's operations against the hardcore of enemy opposition. Before the various corps left Zukissa, however, envoys were sent by Abu Bakr to all apostate tribes in a final attempt to induce them to see reason. These envoys were given identical instructions. They were to call upon the tribes to return to Islam and render full submission. For those tribes which submitted there would be forgiveness and peace. Those tribes that resisted would be fought until no opposition remained, and their women and children would be enslaved. Before the attack against any tribe, the Muslim forces would call the adhan, the Muslim call to prayer, and if the tribe responded with the adhan, it would be assumed that it had submitted. To the corps commanders too, the Caliph gave identical general instructions apart from their specific objectives. These instructions were as follows. A. Seek the tribes which are your objectives. B. Call the adhan. C. If the tribe answers with the adhan, do not attack. After adhan, ask the tribe to confirm its submission, including the payment of taxes. If confirmed, do not attack. D. Those who submit will not be molested. E. Those who do not answer with the adhan, or after the adhan do not confirm full submission, will be dealt with by fire and sword. F. All apostates who have killed Muslims will be killed. Those who have burnt Muslims alive will be burnt alive. With these instructions, Abu Bakr, no longer the meek, submissive companion, launched the forces of Islam against the apostates. End of chapter 12.